Been an interesting week. It's almost always an interesting week in Sanhedrin. And I'm Rachel Scheinerman. I edit My Jewish Learning, a daily dose of Talmud, and I have the pleasure of hosting these classes and inviting a variety of wonderful teachers to come teach them. And this morning for me anyway, we are joined by Rabbi Ari Sachs. So Rabbi Sachs, I think we're all in at the door, and you can go ahead and get started.
Sounds good. Well, hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all here today on this wonderful Thursday leading into Shabbat. Want to share with you the source sheet. If you would like to click on it, I'm also going to be sharing it via my screen share, so you can also see it that way. Now, I know that for many of you, you're so looking forward to the topic of Ben Sorer Umoreh, the rebellious son, and what we do with them. Well, let's just say that I think if I study that passage too hard, it might lead to certain thoughts that I would not be so proud of. So I'm just going to not deal with that personally here. But if there was one of your favorite passages from Ben Sorer Umoreh specifically, I'm sure we would love to hear them in the chat. Any particular moments that came up for you, particularly from that particular chapter. But today, oh wow, I'm getting a lot of feedback. There we go. But today, I'm actually going to focus on a couple of sugyot that occurred in the previous chapter before Ben Sorer Umoreh, because I'm going to bring two kind of pieces of sugyot, meaning I'm not going to bring the full sugya, but I'm going to bring two little pieces from them that I think really teach or really exemplify the beauty, the power, and just the interesting, almost kind of ridiculous nature of some of the topics and some of the ways in which Torah is taught through the Talmud. And when I say ridiculous, I mean just like, I can't believe that they would think in that manner. And yet there is also a logic underneath it. And that logic, I think, is what makes Torah so amazing. So this is really kind of an ode to the wonderful study of Torah, the wonderful study of Talmud with these two particular sugyot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And for you to be able to see it. And so the particular sugya that we're going to start with has to do with sorcery. And I title it, "Don't Do Sorcery Unless It's Through Torah." This particular section of Masechet Sanhedrin has many different laws regarding sorcery and witchcraft and how it is terrible. It is uprooting God's sovereignty over the land. It is what pagans do. It is what the Egyptian priests had done. And that's not something that we do at all as Jews. But then we get to a couple of these interesting little tidbits, and I want to just relate them to you. You can see them on the screen. I had them, the Aramaic and the English side by side here via Sefaria. The Gemara relates, a man named Yanai arrived at a certain inn. He said to the innkeepers, "Give me water to drink." They brought him flour mixed with water. He saw that the lips of the innkeeper woman were moving, and he cast a bit of the drink to the ground, and it turned into scorpions. And he understood that the innkeepers perform sorcery on the drink. The notion that you have the lips were moving, it's like you have this kind of incantation going. So he was aware that there was something happening to the drink that he had in front of him. So Yanai said to them, "I drank from yours, you two drink from mine." So he's aware of what's happening here. But then what does he do? And he also performs sorcery on the drink. He gave it to her to drink, and she turned into a donkey. Okay. He rode upon her and then went to the marketplace. Whenever I tried to tell people about what do you study in Talmud, I think if you were just to kind of say, well, I studied a section talking about giving somebody a drink and they turned into a donkey and you rode them into a marketplace, they'd be like, and this is what you do professionally? Like, is that just a scene from Shrek? Like, I don't understand. Like, what is going on here? And yet this is here. He rode upon her and went to the marketplace. Her friend came and released her from the sorcery, and people saw him riding on a woman in the marketplace. It's like one of those moments where the magic wears off. I'm almost thinking like a Cinderella moment where they're escaping, and then all of a sudden the clock strikes midnight, and then the carriage disappears and it becomes a pumpkin, especially from the Disney version of it. So, what is this so powerful about this particular section? It actually, for me, is at the very beginning. A man named Yanai. Okay. Now, a man named Yanai. I'm going to click on here if you're going to be able to see it. That works here. So you can kind of see it. The commentary is in only going to be directly in the Hebrew through Rashi or through the Aramaic. This is what Rashi says about Yanai. Velo garsinan Rabbi Yanai. Meaning, every time that we encounter a Yanai, it usually has a Rabbi Yanai. And in fact, when I first read this sugya, I thought it was Rabbi Yanai. That's the name that I'm associating with, meaning this is the person who I think is doing this, that he was doing the sorcery because he was trying to get back at this innkeeper for trying to curse him. So it would be seen in a positive light, because I only know a Yanai who is a rabbi. But in fact, what Rashi says is fascinating. Says, no. This isn't the Yanai that you all know. Lo garsina Rabbi Yanai, delav inish me'al yahu she'asa keshafim. Because, of course, Rabbi Yanai, he would not be someone who would actually engage in sorcery. So this is what's so amazing about our text, is that you have a sugya, you have a text that seems to be indicating that, oh, the Jews, they also did sorcery. They did this thing that God doesn't want. And then the commentators are like, no. That's not that's not the Jews we're talking about. That's not the rabbis we're talking about. We're talking about this other guy named Yanai, because if it was Rabbi Yanai, oh, no. He definitely would not do sorcery. So it's also to say that this notion of what is it that's happening in the world around them of the time of the Talmud and the stories that are raised by the rabbis, they're of regular people, but like in terms of seeing like what's right and what's wrong, that there is a certain understanding that there is a right thing to do. And even a story that seems to indicate that maybe there are people who will be considered the good people who are actually doing these things. No. Don't worry. It's not them. But then you get to a story that's a little bit different, and it actually gives us a sense that sorcery could be done by rabbis, but only if it's done through the lens of Torah. This is actually part of the sugya that appears earlier than the first one that I mentioned. Abaye elaborates, one who performs a real act of sorcery is liable to be executed by stoning. One who deceives the eyes is exempt from punishment, but it is prohibited for him to do so. So in other words, that it's a lot, I think, having to do with, if you can tell that somebody did sorcery, then obviously they're going to be punished. But if you can't really tell, you can't really find any proof, and therefore you can't really punish him. But at the same time, you are not supposed to engage in that act. However, what is permitted ab initio is to act like Rav Chanina and Rav Oshaya. Now, I want to say it was permitted ab initio is a very technical term in the Hebrew. It says mutar lechatchila. So if you see on here, mutar lechatchila, there's a very important difference halachically between b'diavad and lechatchila. B'diavad means if they do it, even if it wasn't acceptable, okay, fine, not a big deal. But lechatchila, they're allowed to do it from the outset. Oh, this must be an okay act. So what they're actually talking about is an act of almost sorcery that is okay from the very beginning. We're not talking about the Yanais of the world who maybe we think is Rabbi Yanai, but is actually not one of the people who who are our heroes. But we're talking about an act that is okay for even rabbis to do. And what is it? Rav Chanina and Rav Oshaya, every Shabbat Eve, they would engage in the study of the halachot of creation, and a third-born calf would be created for them, and they would eat it in honor of Shabbat. Now, that kind of sounds like sorcery to me, right? You study something, you use your words, your lips are moving, and then all of a sudden, poof, something is created for you. So as much as the Torah, as much as the Talmud is saying, like, you are not allowed to do this thing, it still happens. And there's still an okay version of it. But the point of Torah study is that it's not that there are things that are black and white. It's that there is the right way to do things and there's the wrong way to do things. It's not that sorcery is inherently wrong or right. It's that there is only the right way, in a sense, to do sorcery. And that is through the study of Torah. I'm actually reminded right now of one of my favorite teachings about Rav Yosef Karo, who was the editor of the Shulchan Aruch, one of the greatest codes of Jewish law, that he was also a Kabbalist. He was also somebody involved in Jewish mysticism. And there is a story told of Rav Yosef Karo on Shavuot evening, which is on Shavuot evening, you're supposed to study Torah all night. And in fact, there's actually very sort of prescription you do. You start from Torah, you go to Mishnah, you go to Talmud, you study everything in a certain order. And it's almost as if you get to this deeper level of connection to God, to the point where in this version of this story, Rav Yosef Karo became the mouthpiece for the Shekhinah. Literally, it says in the text that the Shekhinah spoke through Rav Yosef Karo and telling Rav Yosef Karo and all of his followers to eventually immigrate to the land of Israel. So it's that through study, we can actually access those other big things in the world that are beyond our understanding, what maybe sorcery is trying to get at. And by the way, just as a quick side note, we say that sorcery doesn't exist in Torah, but anybody know what Mazel Tov actually means? Like we say it all the time. It really is like the most non-Jewish Jewish way of saying congratulations, because Mazel Tov means that your constellations are correct. Your constellations are good. Your stars are aligned. That's only referred to in Torah as referring to other nations because it has to do with sorcery, that they use the stars to be able to determine what is right and what is wrong and what to do and what not to do. So there is that ability that we have to be able to access these divine actions, but it's only through the study of Torah that we can be able to do it the right way. Okay. I personally think that that's just a very powerful teaching, but I want to go deeper into like, what does that actually mean in terms of the study of Torah? We do that here in this class. You do it every week when it comes to thinking about how does the Talmud relate to your life and learning Torah to make your life better. But it actually goes a little bit in a different direction in regards to the way in which ancient rabbis would think about what the purpose of Torah study is. And for that, I'm actually going to bring in a little teaching that comes from why Torah study is so amazing is the next headline. That comes from Rabbi Yishmael. Now, if you daven the traditional davening every morning, then you might be familiar with this particular section that comes at the end of the introductory prayers known as Psuke de Zimra, that we have the list of the 13 attributes, not of mercy, but of, or not the 13 methods of study of Torah. According to Rabbi Yishmael, there are 13 ways in which you're supposed to study Torah, or to, in other words, to expound the meaning of the words of Torah. There's a particular prescription of how to do it. And then when you get to the end of that section of this is how you're supposed to study Torah, there's a beautiful little blessing about the purpose of study of Torah. And then you recite Kaddish de Rabbanan, the rabbinic Kaddish, as to way to say, thank you, God, for the ability to study Torah. And as a bit of a preview, I would like us to be able to do that together at the end of this session. We'll leave the last couple of minutes for us to do that reading and then the Kaddish de Rabbanan for all of us together. But the reason I want to bring it up is this. If you take a look at these 13 attributes or these 13 methods, okay? So I'm going to jump down to, we're going to start at number 2, a clarification based on identical words or terms in the biblical text, right? If you have a term that appears here and appears over there, they're similar, then you can have a teaching from there. And that leads directly to a principle derived from one biblical text or from 2 biblical texts. Well, what exactly does that mean in terms of having it from 1 or to have it from 2? And I'm sorry. Let me back up actually for a second. I forgot to do the first one. I actually want to do the first one. Sometimes reading it in English actually trips me up because I'm used to reading in the Hebrew, that the first one is Mikal Vachomer. Okay, mikal vachomer, and mikal vachomer means literally from minor to major, or a conclusion drawn from a minor or lenient law to a major or more strict one, so that you have basically a teaching that gives you, if it's a lenient law, it can tell you, it leads you to a more stricter interpretation, or you could have a stricter interpretation, stricter law that can tell you the more lenient interpretation, almost like the exact opposite of one another. And yet you can kind of understand law from both of those angles. And then I mentioned this clarification based on identical words or terms in the biblical text. One, it fits from one place or another. That's called migzera shava. And then I actually want to scroll down for a moment to, where is it? It's over here. Oh, it's at the very end. Okay, so this is, I think, number 13. Also, two passages that contradict each other until a third passage reconciles them. So you have two passages that seemingly say the same thing, and the third passage comes to actually figure out which one is correct. So the third passage is very important here. So you have just those three different ways of studying Torah. You have learning the major from the lenient and the lenient from the major, what's called kal vachomer. You have a word that appears in a different place, or the same word appears in a different place, and you learn one from the other. That's called a gezerah shava. And then you have this last one, which is where you have two contradicting texts, and you need a third one in order to explain what the actual law is. That is called, in the Hebrew, it is known as Shnei Ketuvim Hamechachashim Ze Et Ze Ad Sheyavo Hakatuv Hashlishi V'Yachriya Beinehem. So that third passage, Hakatuv Hashlishi Yachriya Beinehem, it will solve the issue. Okay, how does that apply to our sugya? So in our text, we have actually two verses, which are really three passages. The first verse comes from Exodus chapter 22, verse 27. And this is in order to teach that if you are, and it's kind of leading into the Ben Sorer Mored topic, that if you curse, if you blaspheme your parents, then your father and your mother, then you are liable to be stoned. You are liable for execution. And one of the places where we get that is from this verse. All right, chapter 22 of Exodus, verse 27. You shall not revile God, nor put a curse upon a chieftain among your people. Elohim lo tekalel, v'nasiv amecha lo ta'or. So you can either get from God, because God is bigger than your parents, that you should not curse your parents. Or you can say from a chieftain that a chieftain is a human being, not the same thing as God, but that your parent is like a chief. Okay, so that seemingly is where our Gemara comes to explain how these passages can both teach us having to do with, or I should say, these passages teach us that you should not blaspheme your parents. But as is the case of the Talmud, and this is why I love it so much, they're like, I don't understand. You just need one of them. You just need the God one. You shall not revile God. That can teach you about your parents. You shall, a curse upon a chieftain. Okay, that should teach you about your parents. Why do you need both of them? Why do you need both in that same verse? Why does the verse need to say it? If it says you shall not revile God, shouldn't that also mean you shall not revile chieftains and your parents? If it says you should not curse your chieftain, shouldn't that also mean you shall not revile God? Why do you need both of them? And then they bring in another verse, which is, you shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am the eternal. This verse kind of acts to kind of resolve the tension, and I'm going to get into the Gemara to see how it resolves the tension of these two passages within one verse that seemingly contradict each other, not in that they inherently contradict each other, but that they're not necessary, that you only need one of them as opposed to both of them. And it also represents the fact that you have this sense of gezerah shava, this idea that there's a word that connects the two together. You have tekalel over here, and you have tekalel over here, or lo tekalel, which means to not insult or to revile. So that's why these verses are connected, because of that similar same verse. But here's where our Gemara comes to the answer as to why we need this third verse to help us understand the previous verse, which is really two different passages. All right, again, from Sanhedrin 66. This works out well according to the one who says it in the verse, you shall not blaspheme Elohim. The word Elohim is non-sacred as it is referring to judges. Okay, well, what does that actually mean? It means that if you have from the very first verse, Elohim lo tekalel, that if you were to read Elohim itself as this, as God, as not as God, because God is only one, but Elohim is written in the plural. Therefore, Elohim could also actually refer to judges, meaning Elohim and Nasi are actually really the same thing here. So reading Elohim in a non-sacred way, it's referring to judges. But according to the one who says that the word Elohim actually refers to God is sacred, as referring to God, what can be said? If the verse is not superfluous, as it is needed to state a special prohibition with regard to God, how is the prohibition against cursing one's parents derived from it? That is to say, if we need to say God here, why, meaning God in terms of the sacred God as opposed to Elohim as chieftains, why do we need that in order to teach us about parents? We can just learn it from the part of the verse that says chieftains. As it is taught in a Braita, the word Elohim in this verse is non-sacred. This is the statement of Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says the word Elohim is sacred, and it is taught in a different Braita. The Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, from where is the prohibition against one who blesses, i.e. curses the name of God, derived? The verse states, you shall not blaspheme God. The Gemara answers, according to the one who says that Elohim is non-sacred, he derives the prohibition according to the sacred meaning of the word from the non-sacred meaning. All right, who's lost already? I am, in terms of the fact that now what it's doing is that it's actually going a little bit deeper into like the minutia of the words. Before, as I kind of had mentioned, that there was a debate as to whether or not you have Elohim, meaning God, and this Nasi and this chieftain, that you don't necessarily need one or the other. And one of the ways in which they said, actually, you really just need the word Elohim is because they go deeper into it and to say that if you have Elohim, it includes all of the chieftains, it includes all of the judges, because you can learn the judges from the fact that if you are going to respect God, you're going to respect the judges. But what it also is saying here is saying that if you were to read Elohim actually as judges, not even as God, but as judges, you can also learn that it's supposed to tell us that you don't need to mention that you should not curse God, because not cursing God is included in not cursing judges. Oi, just oi. Like, on one hand, they're trying to figure out how the verses are working together, but there's such pull. There's such like deep inherent minutia of being able to understand that this one word of Elohim now has two different meanings, and you can actually learn both of the meanings from the same word, which came from the fact that you had this idea of kings and judges and God and who it is you're not supposed to revile, and where do we learn for each of them from specific places in Torah. We're getting into the really nitty-gritty. But at the very end of the day, there's this beautiful little moment that I think represents why this kind of deep study, if it doesn't drive us crazy, if it doesn't drive us too nuts, but if we really spend the time to learn it, and maybe this is why there's the sorcery piece related to it, that if you're able to really get into the learning, to spend the time to unpack every little thing, you are going to be able to find these little nuggets of wisdom that are not just going to make it all worthwhile, but that all of a sudden it will open your eyes to reveal the truth that is embedded within the text itself. And this is just, I think, a little bit of example of what that means, of what that is. And it refers back to the fact that we have this connection of tikalel, of insulting the deaf and of insulting, reviling God, and the fact that you have tikalel, tuf, kuf, lamed, lamed. And at the end of this particular sugya, it says here, the Gemara answers, if so, if it is prohibited to curse God but not judges, let the verse write, you shall not treat lightly, takel, as opposed to you shall not blaspheme, tekalel. It would have been derived from this wording that is prohibited to demean or curse God. What halacha can be derived from the seemingly superfluous second letter, lamed? Because it's not written as takel with one lamed, it's tekalel, tafkof, lamed, lamed. There's a second lamed there, which renders the expression you shall not curse. Conclude from it that this expression includes two prohibitions, a prohibition against cursing God and a prohibition against cursing a judge. In other words, every letter, every jot and tittle of Torah, these two letters, these two lameds, actually teach us something different. Every single letter means something. Every single letter, every single thing in Torah can teach us something special and unique. And sometimes it is painful to try to get there. But when we do, when we see the difference of those two little letters, the entire world opens up in front of us. And a whole way of seeing life, of seeing the world in a very Jewish way opens up in front of us. And I think that we are filled with nothing, at least personally speaking, than reverence for God, than reverence for our tradition of not wanting to revile the one who created us all, not wanting to revile the leaders who tried to teach us these teachings, and especially not to take advantage of these teachings, but rather to share them with one another, to not use them for sorcery purposes, but to use them to help build a community, whether that community is here or you're like Rabbi Yosef Karo and going to bring your community to Israel, whatever it may be, to use whatever learning we can gather from the deep dive into the minutia of the text to be able to come to it with an outcome that gives us a greater understanding and connection to God and the Jewish people. And so with that in mind, I'd like to now recite the ending blessing that occurs at the end of the reading of Rabbi Yishmael Omer, and then to follow up with Kaddish Rabbanan for all those in mourning or observing your site, or if you would like to be able to participate, you may rise. Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu shibaneh beit hamikdash b'mehera v'yameinu v'tinchalkenu b'toratecha v'sham navacha b'yireh k'mei ulam u'kshanim kadmoniyot. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Amen. B'yalma divara kiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach l'olam u'lomei. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemeh tekudshah b'richu ve'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiram be'oma v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Al Yisrael ve'al Rabbanan ve'al Talmidei Hon ve'al kol Talmidei Hon ve'al kol man de'oskin be'oraita di ve'atra hadem v'di v'chol atar v'atar. Yehi Elohon elchon shlamar rabachina v'chisa v'rachamin v'chayina v'yichinu v'zonar v'vichei u'frokana min kadoma v'hun di v'shmaya ve'ara v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlamar rabba min shemaya v'chayim tovim aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Yaseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom hu b'rachamav yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Sachs. I gave some of you the ability to unmute to join in, but should have announced that more toward the beginning. Thank you so much for such a meaningful lesson, Rabbi Sachs. I'm going to just close by announcing a new experiment we're trying over at in the land of Daf Yomi to study, which is a Talmud book club. We're calling it Off the Daf. It's books about Talmud, inspired by Talmud. We're not reading Talmud in this club, but we're starting with this club next month. We're going to read Gila Fine's recent book, The Mad Woman in the Rabbi's Attic, about the 6 named women in the Talmud. And the author is going to be joining us for a discussion. So if that sounds interesting I welcome you to sign up and join us for that program. We're aiming to do a book every other month this year and see if that is a fun supplement, an interesting supplement to our Daf Yomi learning, a chance to explore the Talmud in a very different way. So hopefully I will see some of you there. Did I put the link in already? Let me make sure I did it. Off the Daf, sorry, typing and talking. Daf, and it's auto-correcting Daf, of course, for me. Here's the link to sign up for the book club. I will start adding it to the daily emails as well. Pamela, you got a question?
Sorry, I can't type. I'm on my iPad. I can't make it, but I so want to know, will it be recorded? Can you like sign up and get the recording afterwards? Because I'd love to hear the author talk about it.
Yes, I almost assuredly everything we do like this is recorded and goes straight on our YouTube channel, and we will share the recording through the appropriate channels.
Awesome. I'm
Or
so
you can probably go
excited.
straight.
Thank you. And Yasher Koach, Ari.
Thank you, Pam.
Gila Fine is somebody I actually know personally too. She's awesome. So I'm really excited about this new program. Not to overshadow, Rabbi Sachs, what a beautiful lesson you gave us today. So meaningful. And thank you to all of you for your comments and participation and for showing up every week through this incredibly long journey that we were all on together. We will see you in your inbox tomorrow morning and in this space in exactly a week. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Take care, everyone.